Hi, Assassins. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Cami.
Welcome to Bookish Realms.
We're just two girls who can't stop talking about fantasy books.
Welcome to our deep dive of Assassin's Blade. This episode covers The Assassin and the Healer, which is the second novella from the Assassin's Blade. Like in past episodes, the chapter summaries and character discussion are spoiler-free, but the rest of the pod does include spoilers for all of Throne of Glass. This podcast is for mature audiences only. Cami, take it away, girl.
Let's get into some chapter summaries. As a reminder, this is a non-spoiler section where we summarize the chapters we'll cover in this episode. So if you haven't read the entire series, but you have read The Assassin and the Healer, you can listen to this section. In The Assassin and the Healer, Selena rolls into Inish, a grimy little port town in southeast Aurelia, on her way to train with the silent assassins in the Red Desert. She's not in great shape. Arabin beat the hell out of her for interfering in his slave trade business, and now she's stuck in a backwater tavern, nursing her wounds and brooding. That's where she meets Irene Towers, a young healer working long hours just to scrape together enough coin to get to the legendary Torre Chesme. When Irene gets attacked by mercenaries in the alley of the tavern, Selena saves her life. Selena, being Selena, doesn't just walk away. Instead, she teaches Irene how to defend herself. And because our girl has a flair for the dramatic, she lets the mercenaries come back for round 2, just to make sure Irene can actually hold her own. And she does. Before slipping out of town, Selena leaves behind a hefty bag of gold and a brooch in Irene's room, enough for her to finally leave Inish behind and chase her dreams. And she does. Irene never looks back.
Welcome to character discussion. Here we'll cover who the characters are from this set of chapters, what we know about them, and a golden line from this set of chapters. This section is also spoiler-free. For this novella, we'll be discussing Selena Sardathian and Irene Towers. First, of course, we have to start with Selena. The biggest thing that we learn about Selena in these chapters, our girl is not a fan of Inish, and she is not there for fun. She absolutely hates it. It's dirty, disgusting, covered in mist, smells awful, and is full of miserable people. Basically, the last place Selena would willingly spend her time. But Miss Assassin does have a big milestone coming up. She's about to turn 17. Our girl is growing up right before our eyes. She's loud and proud about being Arobin's second and never hesitates to remind people. But after he ships her off as punishment for freeing the slaves, she starts reevaluating her loyalty to him, especially since he had some absolutely insane deal to trade them in the first place. And we all know Selena is not about that life. Even though she did the right thing by freeing the slaves, Arobin didn't see it that way. Instead, he beat the shit out of her, leaving her with a black eye, a swollen face, and bruises everywhere. Arobin is really fucked up for that, actually. Selena's golden line in this set of chapters, which is probably one of my favorite lines from this whole entire series, for wherever you need to go, and then some, the world needs more healers. Next up, we move on to our girl, Irene. Irene Towers is unfortunately stuck in Inish, working at the White Pig, and basically slaving away for pennies. She was supposed to be on her way to Antica to study at the Torre Chesme, but she ran out of money along the way and got stranded. Irene is from Fenhero, and her backstory is tragic. Most of her family was killed during the king's massacres of magic wielders across the continent. Since healing magic runs in her bloodline, her family was especially targeted, which put them in an incredibly unfortunate position to get murdered by the king. As for what she looks like, Irene is described as having golden tan skin, bright gold brown eyes, and an ordinary brown hair, and she's taller than average. When her parents were killed, she was only 11 years old. She ended up living with her mother's cousin, all while pretending she had no magic. Though, to be fair, that wasn't too hard since magic had already been banned. Irene's golden line from this set of chapters is, quote, "You could have dispatched them without me, but you'd let that man hold a knife to my throat. You let him. Are you insane?" She's saying this to Selena.
Let's explore this world. Here we cover the main world-building elements that come up in The Assassin and the Healer. We'll revisit these places and world-building elements in other episodes. For today, this section is not spoiler-free, so if you haven't finished the entire series, please do not continue. But please come back when you have. This novella brings us to Inish. It's a port town tucked away in the kingdom of Melisande, hovering near the Gulf of Oro. It's so small that it's not on most maps. It's actually literally not on the map in front of the book. I looked for it. It's not there. Selena spends most of her time in Inish at the White Pig Inn. It's supposedly the best inn in town, but it's really a shit show. Still, the White Pig manages to be a central part of this town, mostly because Inish is kind of falling apart. A thick, persistent mist blankets the streets day and night, mixing with the stink of trash and filth. In the markets, you won't find books or refined luxuries. Instead, stalls offer spices, fish, outdated clothing, and nautical gear. For a port town that should be thriving with trade, this limited selection tells the story of a place in decline. And there's a reason for that decline. Over the past 8.5 years, the Kingdom of Melisande has struggled ever since the King of Otterland conquered the continent and rerouted commerce through Eelway. With Melisandre's few eastern ports left to struggle, Inish has become little more than a shadow of its former promise. Yet even here, power finds a way to assert itself. The White Pig Inn isn't just a broken-down inn. Its owner, Nolan, wields a firm grip over the town, backed by a crew of cutthroats and mercenaries. These individuals, in exchange for a share of Nolan's profits, help enforce his rule. Any misstep could lead to a swift and ruthless response from those who consider the inn their home. As we learn Irene's story, we are introduced to Antica, the southern continent. This is where the Torre Chesme is located. Antica is a city of learning, known as a peaceful place that's untouched by the wars of Otterland. Rumor has it that magic still lingers in the air there, and the goddess of healing, Silba, is said to watch over these lands. At the heart of Antica stands the Torre Chesme, the great academy of healers and physicians. Every dedicated healer knows of this school, where the best and brightest study regardless of their background. For ages, the cream-colored towers of the Torre and the winding streets of Antica have inspired people.
Welcome to our analysis and foreshadowing section, which is not spoiler-free. In this segment, we'll analyze key moments and break down parts of the text that tie into or foreshadow future events in the series. While we usually follow the flow of these chapters we're covering, for our Assassin's Blade coverage, we'll have a separate section at the end dedicated to how this novella connects to the end of the series. If you have not read all of Throne of Glass, please stop here to avoid any spoilers.
Selena meeting Irene is such a defining moment in the series. Their interactions are so filled with a deep sense of, honestly, like female rage and intuition, mixed with a desire to fight back against injustice. They parallel each other so much in this novella. At the beginning of this novella, Selena is filled with rage because Arobynn has punished her for sabotaging the deal with Rolf. She is literally looking for fights. Quote, she had made a powerful enemy of the Pirate Lord, and she was fairly certain she'd ruined her relationship with Arobynn, but she had been right. It was worth it. It would always be worth it, she told herself, even if she was sometimes so angry that she couldn't think straight. While she might be pissed, she knows that she did the right thing in freeing those slaves, and I think that is so important.
And while being punished for doing the right thing might piss her off, it was ultimately worth it, which we see time and time again throughout this entire series where Aelin/Selena doing the right thing no matter the cost to her, as long as it doesn't have a cost to anybody else. But if it has a cost to her, she's whatever. But she make sure that she is able to do the right thing and she wants to do the right thing, period, always. And that rage is what leads Selena into the alley where Irene is about to be attacked by 4 mercenaries. Quote, but after pacing for 15 minutes, she pushed aside the furniture and left, looking for a fight, for an adventure, for anything to take her mind off the bruises on her face and the punishment Arobynn had given her, and the temptation to shrink her obligations and instead sail to a land far, far away. We just see how much this rage is affecting her. She's pissed. Our girl is simply pissed off.
And I think one thing that stands out too is that she keeps thinking about the bruises that she has. She has this physical evidence of how Arobynn punished her since he literally beat her up for what she did. And I think that makes it even harder for her to let go of that anger because she has this reminder on her face, and I think the rest of her body too, of what he did to her for doing the right thing. After Selena saves her in the alley, Irene immediately starts apologizing. And Selena says something that I love. I think a lot of women need to hear this. She says, quote, what are you apologizing to me for? Why are you apologizing at all? Those men had it coming. But you should have been smarter on a night like this, when I'd bet all my money you could taste the aggression in that filthy, damned tap room. This is where the connection between the two of them starts turning into that female intuition and connection. Selena literally points out that Irene, as a woman, could taste the anger and the aggression in the tap room. And she's right, because before going into the alley, Irene makes a comment about how she couldn't shake her nerves or the feeling that something was off that night in the White Pig.
And, unfortunately, well, I love being a woman, but unfortunately, like as a woman, I'm sure we have all been in a situation like this where our like female spidey senses are tingling and we know that something is not right and something could potentially go down. So it's just so important to follow that intuition. When you feel in your gut that something's not right, to get out of there. And that's kind of like what Selena was saying to Irene. Like, girl, you knew something was happening. Like, you should have stayed your ass out of this alley. So now I'm about to teach you a lesson, literally. So don't do that shit again. But yeah, so stay safe. Stay safe out here. As one of my students say, stay safe out here in these streets.
I love that she does both things. Like she tells Irene, like, don't fucking apologize. Like I had to kill those men because they had it coming. But also, don't be stupid. Like she's like both sides of the same coin. Like, don't apologize for not doing shit wrong. Like you should be able to go into an alley without worrying that men are gonna kill you or try to take advantage of you. But also know better. Like
I feel like that's just her. That's literally her in a nutshell. But as Irene is cleaning Selena's cut and tells her about wanting to become a healer, Selena gives her a brutal but honest piece of advice. Quote, "Let me give you a piece of advice," the girl said bitterly. "From one working girl to another. Life isn't easy, no matter where you are. You'll make choices you think are right and then suffer for them." Those remarkable eyes flickered. "So, if you're going to be miserable, you might as well go to Antica and be miserable in the shadows of the Torre Chesme." This is so telling of like Selena's current state of mind. She made a choice that she believes is right, but yet she's still like being punished for it. And she is basically like giving Irene that same advice, even though she knows that it could maybe be a terrible outcome. But ultimately, like she said, if you're going to be miserable, you might as well be miserable closer to your dreams than stuck here in this shithole.
I mean, later on in the series, we get so many times when Selena slash Aelin is like in a really terrible state of mind. But I think this is the first time that we really see how miserable she is about not just Arabin punishing her, but like also just the state of her life, the state of where she's going. And we see that too, like in The Assassin in the Desert, which we'll cover next. It like makes me so sad that even though she's like an accomplished assassin, she's so miserable, you know? But I think also the final line of, so if you're going to be miserable, you might as well go to Antica and be miserable in the shadow of the Torre Chesme. It also foreshadows like Selena's rebellion, which we'll keep touching on as we cover Assassin's Blade. But she is going to start rebelling against Arabin, and she starts contemplating the idea of leaving him behind, leaving Riftpool behind, and leaving behind like the current state of her life throughout this novella and throughout this entire book. So,
And Urine also takes note of Selena's visible rage as she's cleaning up her cut. Quote, "Such rage," she thought with a shiver. Such simmering rage. What had she been through to make her look like that? The fact that Urine like immediately realizes that Selena's rage comes from being through things is really important. It's kind of like a mutual understanding about female rage and anger. And I feel like also like you can tell just in somebody's face and in somebody's eyes, like when they're pissed off about something and they're real, like you can see those scars even though they might be like a mental and emotional scars, like you can see those scars through somebody's features sometimes. And Selena is literally like a walking scar in herself, like from the death of her parents, from all like just being in the Assassin's Guild and like having all these things happen to her when she was younger and basically dying like when she was 8 and then like being resurrected. Like, I don't know. She just has been through a lot and like Urine can see that just through like her eyes. Like you can tell through somebody's eyes, like the sadness that's going on in them. So,
and I feel like too at this point, Irene has not allowed herself to feel that kind of anger, like the anger that she sees in Selena. Irene has not let herself feel yet, despite the fact that Irene has also been through a lot. She lost her mother to Otterlin. She lost her whole family. But Irene's rage is coming because Selena takes Irene back to the alley for a crash course on how to defend herself. And as they finish up, the mercenaries who attacked Irene earlier come back and they bring friends. One of the men manages to corner Irene and holds a knife to her throat. And I feel like this is where we start to really see Irene's rage like bubble up. Quote, "Irene couldn't die like this. Not here. Not as a no-name barmaid in this horrible place. Wouldn't die like this. Her mother had gone down swinging. Her mother had fought for her, had killed that soldier so Irene could have a chance to flee, to make something of her life, to do some good for the world. She wouldn't die like this. The rage hit, so staggering that Irene could hardly see through it, could hardly see anything except a year in Inish, a future beyond her grasp, and a life she was not ready to part with. She gave no warning before she stomped down as hard as she could on the bridge of the man's foot. He jerked, howling, but Irene brought up her arms, shoving the dagger from her throat with one hand as she drove her elbow into his gut, drove it with every bit of rage she had burning in her. He groaned as he doubled over, and she slammed her elbow into his temple, just as the girl had shown her. I love this scene. It's just like so obvious with these two female characters and so many other female characters in the series that like anger reveals so much about who you really are. And we see that with Irene here. She refuses to die this way. And she even thinks of like the sacrifice that her mother made and how her mother went down swinging.
And the biggest thing, she just wants to do good in the world, like before she dies. And considering that both her and Selena have been through this like tragic past with both their parents dying, and the fact that like Urine is like, no, my parents weren't able to see this through, and like I want to be able to like carry on the legacy that my parents had. Also, like thinking about those things that open up a floodgate, and Urine fighting back with every bit of rage she has burning in her. The way that Urine describes her rage is so similar to the way that Selena describes her too, which is so interesting because as we know, like Selena / Aelin, that is her power. She is a fire-breathing bitch queen. And it's not just this like, oh, I'm upset, I'm angry. It's like there's fire burning inside me. Like I'm literally like gonna explode if like I don't do something about this.
The story is so beautiful because both of these women have been through so much despite leading what we would consider like completely different lives. Like this encounter between the two of them really does show us that like experiences like this deep suffering and loss does spark this like almost like transformative rage in women who've been wronged. And I love a female rage moment, but that rage does inspire Irene to like fight back and survive and want to change the world around her for what feels like the first time in a long time. Obviously, like she says, like she's spent a year in Inish and she hasn't changed her life in that year. But now in this moment in the alley, all that rage comes back and she's like, I'm going to fight back. I'm going to survive this and I'm getting the fuck out of this fucking white pig inn.
So this anger isn't the only parallel between Irene and Selena. Throughout the series, Selena / Aelin often wonders what her family, her court, and her people would think of her. The things she's done and who she becomes haunt her until she steps into her role as queen and accepts that all the things make her who she is. And Irene has very similar thoughts, mostly about her mother. Quote, what would her mother say if she knew what had become of her daughter? Whether they know it or not, these kinds of thoughts haunt the both of them. And there's a line in Throne of Glass where Selena thinks the exact same thing. Quote, what would the people of Terrasen say if they could see her now? And it's part of like what leads them both to change. They really want to do good and make their loved ones proud. In Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, like I feel like she is thinking of her people in so many different ways and like of her backstory. And the fact that like there is just so many parallels between her and Urine. There also are some differences between them. And I think like we'll get into it later. But yeah.
During this novella, we also see more seeds for Selena's rebellion and her desire to change her life. It's something that she's been thinking about. It's definitely been on her mind, especially since Arobynn beat her for doing what she felt was right and then sent her off to the Red Desert. It makes her want to leave Rifthold behind. She wonders, though, what Sam would think of her leaving it all behind. Quote, he'd suggested that they try to run away when they were in Skulls Bay, actually. So once she was settled someplace, once she had established a new life as a top assassin in whatever land she made her home, she could ask him to join her, and they'd never put up with beatings and humiliations again. Such an easy, inviting idea, such a temptation. We really start to see like Selena letting herself consider other possibilities that aren't the Assassin's Keep and Arobynn, which is all that she's known ever since she was 8. She does want change, and we see that she's willing to like do certain things to achieve that change.
because she wants to run away and maybe eventually ask Sam to join her, which is so sweet. We get a lot of like sweet moments of her thinking about Sam in this novella, and we see like exactly why, because she doesn't want to be beaten or humiliated again. And a Robin is horrible to all of them. He is like supposed to be this caring figure that she's supposed to see that has taken her in, but when she doesn't follow the expectations that he has placed upon her, he just beats the shit out of her. And she's just like, I actually am not taking this any longer. She acknowledges this is a temptation, which is something to let herself think about, but carrying it out is like a whole other thing. Like, this is like a fantasy, a dream for her. Like, she would love to do this, but actually getting herself out of the guild is like not something that she is like, again, she wishes it could happen, but it's easier said than done. She can't just like go back to the keep and just be like, all right, I'm leaving. Like, still has to pay off her debt to him. She still has to like tie up loose ends with that. And then she also still like has to make sure Sam is alive, because at this point in time, she doesn't even know. She doesn't know if he's alive after like what occurred between like on that night.
Like so many other characters in the series, Irene is taken aback by Selena's physical appearance and her scars. We get a lot of interesting language in Irene's descriptions of Selena. Selena finally removes her cloak, and Irene is really kind of taken aback by her appearance. Quote, that the girl was young, perhaps 2 or 3 years younger than Irene, but felt old. That the girl was beautiful, with golden hair and blue eyes that shone in the candlelight. Or that the girl's face would have been even more beautiful had it not been covered in a patchwork of bruises. Such horrible bruises, including a black eye that had undoubtedly been swollen shut at some point. I have to point out, because, I'm a little crazy. In the book, the word felt, when she says felt old, that the girl was young but felt old, felt is italicized. And I'm not going to spiral about why, but we do have to wonder why Selena feels older to Irene, even though Irene can tell that Selena's younger than her. Is it because of everything Selena's been through that she feels old? Or is it a hint to that ancient power that she has inside of her, even if it's not active in this moment? Why is it that Selena feeling old is what Irene points out first, and that word is in italics? It really stood out to me.
So the second thing that Irene notices is that Selena is beautiful, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She is our beautiful queen. Irene also immediately takes note of Selena's bruises and her black eye, which were given to her by a Robin. Literally, fuck him. I can't wait to like talk about him in character discussion, because I'm gonna be like, his grimy, dirty, bitch ass be beating on my queen. We hate him. In our Crown of Midnight coverage, we broke down how often different characters notice Selena's eyes, which are a huge hint to her Ash River lineage, and they reveal that she's Aelin Galathynius. Urine also notices Selena's eyes and immediately connects her to fire. Quote, the girl's eyes flashed to hers. They were ringed with gold. Stunning. Even with the bruises, the girl was alluring, like wildfire, or a summer storm swept in off the Gulf of Oro. The ring of gold is the Ash River trait that makes Cale sink to his knees as he realizes who's been under his nose the entire time they were together. And again, we get another character who describes Aelin using fire. And Urine says she's like wildfire, which is how Selena describes her magic in Air of Fire. So
I think it's interesting too. Irene compares Selena to a summer storm, which it might be a stretch, but I was like, is this a hint to her water affinity? Because then we would have both of her powers mentioned in one sentence. But honestly, that might just be like the English major in me. It might just be descriptive language. But
yeah.
Irene does do this more than once. She says, quote, this girl wasn't like wildfire. She was wildfire, deadly and uncontrollable. Again, wildfire, Aelin, it's all getting connected. But she sees her as uncontrollable, which is how Selena feels about her magic until the end of Air of Fire. This is why Assassin's Blade has to be read before Air of Fire, because it just slides so easily into these conversations that we have in Air of Fire, where we see all of these, like, it's uncontrollable, wildfire. We get all these hints, and then we see that, like, actually happening.
Irene also uses fire when she points out Selena's eyes again. Quote, the wildfire in the girl's eyes had turned into a scorching blue flame. Fire is tied to Selena and Aelin time and time again. Like, so many different times. Like there's been fire and Selena in the same sentence. And I think it's also interesting here because blue flame is the first like flame that we see from Selena in this whole entire series, because that's what comes out in when they're in the portal in Crown of Midnight. So I just think it's interesting that she describes it as being scorching blue flame instead of like what a typical fire looks like. And we know, I think blue is like the hottest flame that there is the blue flame. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think too, like Irene pointing out that Selena's anger, like her emotions, is what makes her eyes like flare up. It does tie into how we see like Selena not being able to control her power. Like it rises up when she's feeling like strong emotions. So it's interesting here that like Irene also notices that, even though it's just in her eyes. It's not just Selena being beautiful or her eyes that stand out to Irene, though. Selena is covered in bruises and scars, which Irene does bring up, which I think is a little bold of her. But she says, quote, "I could find something for your face," Irene blurted. The girl paused with a hand on the doorknob and looked over her shoulder. These are meant to be a reminder. For what? Or to whom? She shouldn't pry, shouldn't have even asked. She smiled bitterly. For me. Irene thought of the scars she'd seen on her body and wondered if those were all reminders too. We get this whole idea that like Selena needs a reminder of what was done to her, why Arabin punished her. All of these like bruises and scars, she needs them as like markers for what's happened in her life. And that hits especially hard knowing that in Kingdom of Ash, Aelin loses all of these reminders of the things that have happened, the things that have been done to her, the things that she's been through. Because here she literally tells this random woman she meets, like, these are meant to be a reminder for me, not for anyone else. So that line, like, really got me. But
it is really sad, like, when you go back to Kingdom of Ash and you're like, damn. Because it also, like, not only does the losing her scars, like, obviously it's upsetting to her, but it makes her, like, lose a sense of her identity. She's like, I went through all this shit to get here, and now it's just, like, simply all wiped away, which is really sad. But Yrene gets her own scars too, which becomes a reminder of her encounter in the alley with the mercenary. And it's the first time that she is able to defend herself. We know that the scar is on her throat, and when Kale first meets Yrene in Tower of Dawn, this scar is one of the first things he notices. I love Kale and Yrene together. Like, I think that they're a perfect match. Like, 10 out of 10. I actually really do love them and their relationship. So, yeah.
the first nice thing you say about Kale is just, I like his wife.
Yeah, I like his wife. I like what she brings out of him. Like, I think that she brings another side out of him that like Selena doesn't. Like, I think that Selena makes him crazy, which like as she should, because she is a little crazy herself. But like Yrene brings out this like, I don't know, Yrene brings out, I think, like, who Kale should have been from the beginning, because she's not, like, got this crazy wildfire shit going on. She's not Fae. Like, she's not all these things. And I don't know. I just think, like, the way that he is towards Yrene is so sweet to me. But anyways.
As Selena prepares to leave Inish, she reflects on fate. She doesn't know it yet, but meeting Irene transforms not only Selena's own destiny, but also all of Aurelia. Although she had considered running away several times earlier in the novella, after helping Irene, she seems almost like ready or like reset, and she's going to continue toward the Red Desert. Quote, but Dawn was about 2 hours away, and she should probably go back to her room now, if only to pack and go. Go, not because she was ordered to or because she found her punishment acceptable, but because she needed to. She needed to go to the Red Desert, even if it was only to see where the word planned to lead her. Staying, running away to another land, avoiding her fate. She wouldn't do that. She couldn't be like Irene, a living reminder of loss and shoved aside dreams. No, she'd continue to the Red Desert and follow this path, wherever it led, however much it stung her pride. We talked about this a million times, but fate is such a constant thread in Throne of Glass, and all of these moments do end up coming together in the end.
And if Selena had run off and not gone to the Red Desert, she wouldn't have met Ansel and Ilias, who also come to her aid at the end of the series. And the line avoiding her fate, she wouldn't do that, is also so significant since Aelin's fate is tied to the Nameless prophecy. Following this path also leads her to so much pain, but it also ends up saving the world. And it helps her like meet the people along the way that will help her also save the world. Both Selena and Urine feel like fate has brought them together. After Urine finds Selena's note and the money she left for her, she thinks, quote, Gods or fate or just pure coincidence and kindness, it was a gift. This was a gift. The world was wide open, and hers for the taking. If she dared, she could go to Antica, attend the Torre Kesme, go anywhere she wished. Urine doesn't know what brought them together, but she knows that it was a gift.
And Selena does give Irene a gift, not just like the gift of money or like the gift of being able to defend herself, but also like she gives her the gift of an opportunity to like change her life and her current circumstances. And it's so interesting because Selena feels the same way about this encounter with Irene. She says, quote, yet there, deep in her gut, was a small but insistent tug, a tug on a strand of some invisible web. So Selena decided to tug back just to see how far and wide the reverberations would go. This tug comes up again when Selena meets Manon, which we love. And I do think this tug represents this kind of like subtle call from destiny of like, do follow this tug, do follow this strand. Even if some of those tugs are really painful, they're going to like lead you down the right direction.
And there's something that is connecting all of these women, bringing them together to like heal the world, which I think is really sweet because, like, again, women, we run the world. We literally run the world. These actions, big and small, connect all of our characters together. Selena also thinks, quote, so maybe it was the gods at work. Maybe it was some force beyond them, beyond mortal comprehension. Or maybe it was just for what and who Selena would never be. A constant theme of divine influence makes its way into the series throughout so many different times and so many different points of times throughout this series.
Yeah, I feel like we get so many characters who ask the same kind of question, like who is controlling what? Is it the gods? Is it fate? Is it the word? Is it something beyond that we like don't know yet? And I do think it's interesting here that Selena says if there is another force at work, she feels like it's not for her, even though they are. Like she is, it's just so funny because she is the one, but she feels so often like these things are not for her. And like these forces are meant for someone that she feels she can never become, something that she can never like fulfill.
I think it's also so interesting because I cannot wait until Sarah J. Maas like releases the Twilight of the Gods because I think that's going to be such a huge connection piece in everything that has occurred in all of these series. So I'm interested to see like what will occur when/if that series comes out.
I agree. I'm like so eager. Now, how does this novella come back to play later in the series? At the end of this novella, Selena thinks, as she stalked through the foggy streets toward the ramshackle docks, Selena had prayed Irene Towers wasn't foolish enough to tell anyone, especially the innkeeper, about the money. Prayed Irene Towers seized her life with both hands and set out for the pale stone city of Antica. Prayed that somehow, years from now, Irene will return to this continent and maybe, just maybe, heal their shattered world a little bit. I'm like choking up because this is exactly what Irene does. She goes to the Torre Chesme and begins her training.
She becomes the heir apparent to the healer on high, and she does heal their shattered world. She helps defeat Erewhon.
This all comes together after Kale's injury leaves him unable to walk. He goes to Antica, that's how he ends up there, to one, gain their alliance, but also to see if the Torre Chesme healers can heal his injury. Irene works to heal his spine injury, and he ends up telling her all about what's happened to him and everything they've learned about the Valg, the word keys, the word gates, all of it. And that's when Irene and Kale start working together to find answers on how to defeat the Valg.
And as Kale and Urine get closer, he learns that she's been training the healers at the Torre Kesme to protect them. And why does she do that? It's because Selena taught her and told her, quote, if you get the chance, teach it to any female who will take the time to listen. Again, it's so full circle. I remember like reading it in the Tower of Dawn and being like, she fulfilled the promise. Like she literally fulfilled the promise.
I love it. Ugh. Together, Irene and Kale figure out that the healers are the ancestors of the Fae and that their magic can be used to fight the Valg. Irene realizes that the Valg are like parasites and that she can heal someone who is possessed by them. This little side quest also allows Nezrin and Sartak to figure out that Maeve is a Valg queen.
Also, Yrene and Kale, they fall in love, of course. So cute. Towards the end of Tower of Dawn, they get married, and she also gets pregnant. They're gonna have a baby. Earlier in the book, Kale notices that Yrene always has something in her pocket and gifts her a locket to keep it safe. In literally the last few pages of Tower of Dawn, she reveals that it's a note from an assassin who saved her life. The note says, quote, "For wherever you need to go and then some, the world needs more healers." And when she shows that note to Kale, he immediately knew who it was.
Yeah, he immediately recognizes her handwriting and he realizes how all these threads are connected. And it just it is beautiful. It is masterful. It is everything to me. I think I'm someone who keeps everything. I keep every card someone wrote me, has written me. I keep everything. And I think it's so beautiful that Irene kept this note from Selena and not just kept it tucked away in a drawer. She keeps it with her all the time. Kale and Irene return to Rifthold to share everything they've learned to help fight against Erewhon and Maeve. In the final battle of Kingdom of Ash, Irene defeats Erewhon with her healing magic. If Selena had never given Irene the money and the brooch, Irene would have never learned to be a healer, would have never met and healed Kale, and they wouldn't have put all these pieces together to defeat Erewhon. Selena's gift, her act of kindness toward Irene, saved the world. And that, Assassins, is why this novella matters.
Why am I getting a little teary-eyed?
It's one of the more poetic and beautiful connections, I think. I think that's why. Obviously, all of the acts of kindness are amazing, freeing the slaves, giving Ansel extra time, all of that. But this is, I just think it's poetic and beautiful.
But next we have our favorite moments. These are moments in this set of chapters that we really just loved.
I have two favorite moments in this novella. The first one, and probably the sadder of the two, is when Selena is teaching Irene to fight and she realizes just how helpless Irene was in the alley. In that moment, she thinks, helpless. What was it like to be helpless to defend yourself? A shudder runs through her, a shudder that has nothing to do with the rats gnawing on dead mercenaries, but something much deeper. I think this moment is so revealing of what Selena truly fears. She has this fear of being helpless, of being unable to defend herself. And as the series unfolds, we see that this fear evolves and grows, honestly. Aelin becomes haunted by the possibility of not being able to protect her friends, of being helpless to protect them. These are the people that she loves. And I do think that fear is part of what makes her just so guarded. The second moment comes right after their crash course in self-defense in the alley. At this point, Selena reflects, quote, "There was such irony," she realized, in them working together, the assassin and the healer, two opposite sides of the coin. I love this observation because despite being, quote unquote, polar opposites, they're linked. Selena feels that she brings death while Irene brings life. And when they join forces, they bring this balance and almost this sense of wholeness. It's a reminder that an assassin, a healer, and a group of friends can come together to save the world. No matter who you are, where you come from, or what you've been through, you can make a difference.
From this novella, I just have one favorite moment. And honestly, if I could quote the whole series, I would. But I was I just need to pick one. So my quote comes from Irene as she is contemplating Selena's age. She thinks, the stranger couldn't have been older than 17 or 18, but Otterlin had made them all grow up fast. Too fast. I know in the last episode we talked about how Selena and Sam were forced to grow up because of their traumatic past and both of their parents being killed, but this is really the reality for a lot of people that are from Aurelia. It was not uncommon for people's parents to be killed at such a young age, and it's honestly really heartbreaking that so many young children and their innocence were taken away from them. And again, like I love how we talk about them like this is really real, but it does like translate into real life because when something traumatic does happen to young people or to anyone at a young age, like that innocence is just stripped away and it's really sad and it makes people mature way beyond their years. Because they really don't have a choice. And we know that choice is something that's really big for Selena throughout this series. So and lastly, our final thoughts.
I think this novella, and I think you can tell by the way that we talk about it, it really does hit different on a reread. Irene becomes like such a central figure in Aylin's journey and Kale's journey and in the fight to save Aurelia. None of it would have been possible if Selena hadn't recognized a woman at one of the lowest points in her life and extended a helping hand. It is just like girl power for real and like a reminder that all of us girlies, we have to stick together. On a better note, I also really love that all of these novellas take us to like so many new places in Aurelia. It is really fun to like get these in-depth descriptions of all these places on the map that outside of these novellas we really like don't get to visit. I also just like I couldn't help but chuckle a few times when I thought about the fact that Irene and Aylin are Eskimo sisters. So yeah.
When I read that in your like little like when I was reading through your thing, I was like, holy shit, you're right. They are Eskimo sisters.
So
Oh, but literally, yes to everything that Cami says. I think it is literally awesome that this world is just run by women, and there's so many badass women in this universe, and girls really do run the world, baby. Like we are those people. Also, I just love that Yrene is the woman who banishes Erewhon, and I remember like her coming back up in Tower of Dawn and being like, "Oh my god, that's the girl from the novella." Because at this point in time, like if you do the tandem read or whatever, like if even if you don't do the tandem read, no, if you do the tandem read, I think you start with Tower of Dawn and you like meet her first. So she's your like first person coming back from the novellas. And you're like, wait, that's the girl from the novella. And then at the end of Empire of Storms, you're like, wait, all the players are back. These are all the people back from the novellas. So she's like your first experience you get when you're doing the tandem read. But I think that like it just is, I don't know, this novella is just really beautiful. And like rereading this series has been so much fun. And like, I can't wait to just keep going. So, but that wraps up our deep dive for Assassin and the Healer, the second novella in Assassin's Blade. We hope you enjoyed our analysis and theories. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok, where our handle is at Bookish Realms Pod.
we'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, so drop us a comment or send us a message. Also, leave us a rating if you like what you heard. It really helps us out.
Join us next week when we continue our deep dives with the next novella in the Assassin's Blade, The Assassin in the Desert. Until then, keep reading, Assassins.
Bye!